And good morning to everyone. On behalf of the Institute of Regional Studies, President IRS, Ambassador Nadeem Riaz, and my colleague, I welcome all the participants of this webinar on Sri Lankan economic crisis. Dear participants, Sri Lanka is struggling with economic meltdown for the last 2 years. But today, the situation has reached to such a level where Sri Lanka could witness complete bankruptcy. Colombo's foreign exchange reserves have come down to less than $2 billion against $7 billion total debt due this year. Sri Lanka does not have enough money to even buy the essential food items to feed its nation of 22 million people. According to World Bank estimates, 500,000 people have plunged into poverty during this recent crisis. People are on street demanding solution to worsening economic crisis and difficulties, and also the removal of Rajapaksa, as they claim he was responsible for dragging the country into this worst economic crisis that Colombo ever faced in its history. So how did Sri Lanka get into this worst economic crisis? And was the Rajapaksa regime was responsible for this crisis, or the other external factors were involved? How long will it take for the Colombo to get out of this vicious cycle of economic inactivity? And is there a possibility of military taking control of important institutions to deal with economic and political crisis going on in this country? And how China and India are responding to this situation? So to answer these pressing questions, we have Asanga Abhiyaguna Sikara with us from Sri Lanka. So welcome Asanga to this webinar, and thank you very much for your time and patience, and it's the midnight in the United States. Dear participants, Asanga is an author, international security and geopolitics analyst, and strategic advisor from Sri Lanka. He is senior fellow at the Millennium Project, Washington, D.C. He has 3 books on his credit: Conundrum of Ireland, published in I think 2021. Sri Lanka at Crossroads, 2019, and Towards a Better World, 2015. He has led 2 government think tanks providing strategic advocacy on foreign policy and security in Sri Lanka. He was the founding director of Journal of the National Security Think Tank under the Ministry of Defense. With this introduction, I request you, Asanga, to please elaborate the audience on the economic and political situation in Sri Lanka. Over to you.
Thank you so much, Imran, and thank you very much to IRS for having me. I know that IRS has been following Sri Lanka so closely. My last interactions with IRS, even last year, clearly highlights the political economic dysfunctionality, which is right now what is happening. So I thank you for the invitation. I have a presentation which I would like to share.
Sure, Ahmad, you please.
Allowed.
Thank you. Can you see the slides?
Yes, we can clearly see.
Okay, thank you so much. So, how did the economic crisis? What made the economic crisis trigger? It was a serious liquidity issue, which Imran just highlighted in his introduction, as well as the insolvency issue. You can see the foreign reserves are dropping in this slide. Basically, from January 2019, now it has gone below 500 million. So the crisis has been there. I mean, the drop has been there since the pandemic, the beginning of the pandemic, where Gotabaya Rajapaksa came towards the latter part of 2019 as the president. The drop has been, you can see the significant drop due to there's no remittances coming in, as well as the tourism income dropped significantly. So this liquidity issue was continuing. And there were multiple warnings that was given by many academics as well as economists that Sri Lanka would need to sort of go for external assistance. So the insolvency issue is the huge amount of debt, which is about 51 billion right now totally, which Sri Lanka defaulted last week, that we are unable to pay this significant debt, which for the borrowings, basically. I'll come to that. So you could see this is the debt structure basically of Sri Lanka. Now, according to JP Morgan's analysis, basically that at least that we would need a gross debt servicing would amount about 7 billion this year. We need about 7 billion, but what we have is about less than a billion. So which is, we are in a serious crisis. The sovereign debt default and is exposed to external. I mean, you could see that Sri Lanka is seriously exposed right now to external shocks, and where President Rajapaksa basically now China is a significant component in this, although it's 10%, just like Japan, because of the high interest rates that we've been borrowing. And many of the Chinese projects are clearly we have not got revenue from any of not the expected revenue, even from the Hambantota port, as well as the airport projects, as well as many others. So you can see the current debt to GDP ratio skyrocketed in recent years. So increased from 42% in 2019 to 104%. And right now, you could see, going beyond that. The credit ratings were downgraded also. I mean, if you look at it from 2000, now you can see from 18, 19. So continuously there is downgrading going on. And then at a time of 21 and 22, where the central bank governor completely, start arguing, saying that these credit ratings, Western ratings, as well as, it has no impact, so start coming up with this his own sort of theory, rejecting even the credit ratings that was given. So the multiple warnings were rejected, and due to the credit rating, the depletion of that, we could not borrow from the institutions, as well as we couldn't fix it even back then, because we've been rejecting for, the reason is clearly because of the ultranationalist posture of the government. I'll come to that. But during the pandemic time, when Gotabaya came to power, basically the president, Gotabaya Rajapaksa, there were tax cuts clearly, and nearly half, from 15%, nearly half of tax cuts was basically introduced. And this had significant impact to the economy. And basically there were multiple structural adjustments to the political structure, like the constitutional amendments bringing all power to most of the checks and balances, the independent institutions. So were basically, the power was centered towards the executive. And what you see is the government's ultranationalist posture, which I've been sort of writing since 2020, 21. You can, most of my writings are published, in different places, London School of Economics, the ORF, warning of this ultranationalist posture, not sort of engaging, opening up, even seeing many things as a significant national security threat. like the Millennium Challenge Corporation grant that was given to Sri Lanka by the US was seen as a national security threat. So many things, the government start weaponizing its decisions, say, towards their policy prescription, which is the ultra-nationalist policy prescription, the import subsidization economy, the export orientate, basically focusing on more on homegrown as well as agricultural. The fertilizer crisis, which triggered, is a clear example of the inward policy prescription or the ultra-nationalist policy prescription that the government had. So there's significant heavy militarization. Now here is a comparison. I see a comparison even with Pakistan. The horizontally, Gotabaya appointed more than 28 military appointments. And the concern, I see quite similarities to Pakistan's situation, which happened on the 9th of April this month. And in Sri Lanka, basically protests, everything triggered on the 1st of April. So the significant democratic backsliding was due to the hybrid model, which the government, the ultra-nationalist model with the military that Gotabaya commenced. So the rejection of early warnings was also because of the ultra-nationalist posture, saying the IMF is the economic hitman and we don't want to get there. So depending heavily on China. These are the military appointments basically Sri Lanka made. You can see on the foreign affairs, the economy, economic ministry, the health ministry, the law and order, trade and commerce, disaster management, ports, civil aviation, agriculture, archaeology, the simple provisions like, the provisions to like the stores to, the Satosa is a stores, basically the government stores, the Department of, the multi-purpose task force, then poverty elevation task force, then the task force for economic revival. So basically multiple, even the governor, going to one of the governors. So this is the first time that Sri Lanka had such a significant military appointments into the civilian space. And here I warned basically during this time when the appointments are going on. So there's a significant the military presence in the government bureaucracy, as well as would have a significant impact to the basically the government's decisions or the policy decisions. And it did have, clearly on like the 2021 book, The Conundrum of an Island, which I published, highlights that the reason that the military appointments was because Gotabaya is most trusted, because he was a former military person and he trusted the military, the structure. And he introduced it because of, the country at that time, he came to power through the Easter Sunday, the attacks in 2019. So the country had a sort of a centripetal force after the Easter Sunday attack, where people gathered requesting for, sort out the security of the country. So the main theme was the national security. And of course, Gotabaya was the solution that many people saw at that time. So that's the reason that he received 6.9 million votes. And so a strong, so I compare it to a Leviathan, basically a central figure was what the people was expecting. And what you see today is that what the people built in 2019, this, the heavy-centered, executive, making the constitutional amendments and the ultra-nationalist posture, the militarization, all of that, you see a significant, a rejection coming in from the general public. Now, if you look at it, the the coming anarchy, which is a very clear piece which I wrote in 2021, saying that the interference to the judiciary, the danger of interfering with the judiciary, is a serious issue, because it was not seen as a, I mean, I would say from within the regime, they did not see that as a serious concern, which was very unfortunate, because some of the criminals were pardoned, and there was a serious human rights concern coming in from this interference to the judiciary, as well as the Prevention of Terrorism Act, which Gotabaya used to arrest multiple people, so many people. And so the extrajudicial arrest that was done. So Sri Lanka has a tendency, I mean, if you look at the history, the 1971, 1988, that we had 2 youth insurrections. They were bloody. I mean, so many young people died, and so it has a tendency to move towards an anarchic, state. So which happened in 71 and 88, and what I see is the same sort of pattern. It's happening now, where people has lost trust. Now you see 2 cabinets being appointed by Gotabaya, been rejected. So the significant trust deficiency between the public and the regime is clearly evident from the protests, which is going on even right now. Even today, I heard that you have all the unions, the trade unions, and everybody joining the protesters. So it's actually grassroots level, and you see mothers, children, everybody in the society is protesting. The first condition they want is Rajapaksa out. They don't want the Rajapaksa family due to corruption as well, and the economic dysfunctionality. There was the shooting incident which happened. So there was a shooting incident in Rabukan, where even you could see his son Namal Rajapaksa talking about it, saying that that was an incident that even he condemned. So as well as many others, U.S. ambassadors, to everyone. So you can see what they built, the horizontal, the heavy militarization is at full play, even at a time like this. So this is the danger that I see. Either Sri Lanka can move quickly towards a model like Myanmar, and which is a very dangerous situation. That is the worst case scenario, or else it could move the democratic wheels, as well as go in that direction and correct the situation. What is the main problem in the political sphere has to be understood. I mean, most of the discussion has been on the economic situation and all that. What really happened was the authoritarian model which Gotabaya introduced. There was a lot of references to Lee Kuan Yew. I mean, if you look at it from the beginning, 2009, his election, saying that Singapore, Lee Kuan Yew was mentioned so many times. Now, the authoritarian model, which he tried to introduce, was a hard authoritarian model. So with the military coming in to so many, places in government. Now, the Easter Sunday attack, as well as the pandemic, created that perfect environment for Gotabaya to create that hard authoritarian model. Now, governments, basically the disciplinary project during the pandemic, using the military, was a clear sort of opportunity for Gotabaya even to make those constitution amendments during the pandemic, which he saw that even the 2/3 majority which he won from the parliament as an advantage, that that he could bring all the institutions under him and control through him. Now, Sri Lanka does not work like that. That this is, I think, because of his inexperienced politics. He is he's new to politics. He's never done politics before, unlike his brother. If you look at it, there was a kind of a fuzzy power arrangement between the executive and the legislature, the prime minister. First time the Sri Lanka had the sibling regime, and how more than that, we had 4 other family members coming in from the Rajapaksa. What Dr. Harsha De Silva says, he clearly identified the Rajapaksa, like an octopus, have held onto every aspect of public life in Sri Lanka. And this, the bureaucracy rejected, even at that time. When I did a research back in 2021, interviewing many bureaucrats, they rejected the Rajapaksa's maneuvers to bring in the military into the ministries. So now, if you look at, this is a quote by Giorgio, the former Minister of Foreign Affairs in Singapore. Singapore does not have a hard authoritarian; it has a kind of a soft authoritarian. He compared it, to a banyan tree. He says that when the tree becomes dense, it shuts out too much light to allow new growth on the ground beneath. So it needs to be pruned. And what he means by it needs to be pruned is that you need to look after, you need to win the public opinion also. You need to build the trust. So now this actually has a reference to Antonio Gramsci's ideological hegemony. And I find a connection with that, where basically the hegemony, the state which Gotabaya tried to build, is rooted with force. But then he lost the other, basically the hegemony of the civil society. And that's something that he could not sort of, develop. And it must be based on consent, minds and hearts, so which he could not win. Like such values could be earned. And this is according to Gramsci, as well as it cannot be forced. So this is where the problem was. And when I look at the Pakistan's case, I read the same sort of dimensions when coming in the hybrid model which Imran Khan made, as well as how he lost the power, as well as how he tried to sort of regain power even during the no confidence motion and all that. So here's the situation that I think the leaders coming in, in Pakistan you had about 3 years, I believe, 3 to 4 years or his presidency, but then Gotabaya was 3 years. And it's really important. And there is many nations, you see blurred the role of force and consent. So the force and consent is where Gotabaya could not get the balance right. So this is where the main political problem was. And the concern on China is also very serious during Gotabaya Rajapaksa's regime. I call it a strategic trap by China. The reason I call it a strategic trap is like, now debt trap has been spoken multiple times by Western scholars, the Chatham House papers, debunking it, saying that the volume, looking at the volume, that Chinese volume is only 10%, the other volumes are much higher. So, there is no debt trap. That's kind of an incorrect view, because I see a strategic trap on 3 dimensions. First is on the Rajapaksa political party. How much of assistance funding is given to the political party to turn it to an autocratic rule, basically. China is the only country that has been supporting the Rajapaksa regime to move towards an autocratic regime. So this is the danger, the politicals in the political sphere. That's the first. The second is the human rights. China, you can see a few months ago at the Human Rights Council voting for Sri Lanka and supporting, and reciprocally China expecting Sri Lanka to talk about Xinjiang and all that. So which Sri Lankan government did for the first time in its foreign policy history, that Sri Lankan Foreign Secretary has spoken about Xinjiang. So there's a reciprocal sort of human rights arrangement there. And the third is on the military sphere and the surveillance. So these are the 3 dimensions that I see on I call it a strategic trap in Sri Lanka. So there are multiple, areas where during for example, one particular example I can give you, 24 hours before Wang Yi came to Sri Lanka, We paid for the Chinese fertilizer shipment, which was rejected, and where our bank was blacklisted. And so we took the item out of Wang Yi's agenda in Colombo. So this happened 24 hours before. So you can see the significant Chinese influence in the regime as well as in the country. Now, the problem of debt trap is it only looks at the quantitative data. It does not capture the strategic side much. And the reason for the sudden rupture that I see is where the protesters, surrounding the president's house, and the sudden rupture is clearly because of the economic crisis, the hardship. Some of the protesters I interviewed clearly mentioned they are not supporting any other political party, nor the opposition leader. They are coming because out of their houses, and all because they are, they don't have electricity, 10 hours. They don't have essential food. So that's the reason, the main reason was the economic crisis. And so you can see the deaths which happened, several weeks before the main rupture, which, standing at the fuel, to buy fuel as well as the essential goods. And so the three attributes which the protesters are, highlighting has a clear pattern to even the Arab Spring, which is autocracy, corruption, and poverty. So autocracy is clearly, they want the Rajapaksas out. The corruption is highlighted every day in the social media about significant, huge corruption, and also the economic hardship. So I see a clear pattern. Even you can compare it to the Tahrir Square to Galle Face, which is happening in Colombo. And so basically the immediate resignation, followed with the ministers resigning, shows that even the ministers did not see the Rajapaksas, the family rule, did not sort of support that. I mean, even some of the senior ministers were not happy. I know because, for example, the senior minister, the foreign minister himself had, multiple concerns. And many senior ministers had concerns. And so reappointments of, 4 ministers followed. That's the immediate reappointment of the first cabinet, where even the finance minister stepped down 24 hours after that, and then followed by 17. And protesters are rejecting all of them. And every single minister, what they want to see is new faces. They want to see new members. And so what they're asking is, I mean, to have new members, you need to have elections. So basically to have they're saying that most of the members, even in the parliament, are connected, except for few, to the Rajapaksa family and for corruption. And Prime Minister being absent in the second, basically the cabinet swearing is a significant, I think, usually the Prime Minister is there for the swearing ceremony, but he was absent during the second round of cabinet ministers were sworn in. And so there is an effort to align with the protesters. You can see even the Rajapaksa family members are trying to align, but the protesters are rejecting. And there are many government ministers also trying to align with the protesters, but they are completely rejecting. They don't want to talk to them. Prime Minister has invited them to talk, but they are rejecting. And to have the political stability, I think immediately what Sri Lanka requires is a political stability right now, because the IMF, I think what I heard from an economist in New York is that it take about 3 to 6 months for IMF, the packages as well as the structural adjustments, all of this to take place. But the political this functionality needs to be immediately be sorted out, because the tendency that I mentioned towards going to an anarchic situation is we are really close to that. And we need to come together to agree on some common program that steers the economy out of the current crisis. Now, the economist Anushka Vijayasinghe, he mentions that the fiscal adjustment must be swift and sensible and sensitive to vulnerable groups, because the vulnerable groups here, there'll be a serious amount of poverty. I mean, you can see a rise in poverty levels, and there are so many vulnerable groups in the community, and which needs to be looked after, and so that should be a priority. Now, he clearly mentions, this is again, Anushka, he's saying that the not listening to evidence as well as the external expertise was one of the biggest issues in the government. And the reason they didn't listen is because of the ultra-nationalist posture they had, clearly. The political consensus in key reforms areas, such as fiscal adjustments, market-based pricing, and including state-owned enterprise reforms. So all of these reforms are required, but then without the political stability, you cannot have any of these reforms. So the first is that. And I think it's time that the Rajapaksas listen to the protesters, because it has come to a point that it is going completely out of control. The 22nd of April, Rajapaksa's Gazette notification to calling the military to all districts is a dangerous sign. And this is a sign that I mentioned earlier, that we are heading towards the Myanmar model. And you don't want to get there at all. And so there is an anti-IMF public posturing also, because of the ultranationalist posture which we had, but then that needs to be handled really well, because there could be party-led protesters due to budget cuts and disagreements, which the IMF would come with conditionalities. So there will be a sentiment of that, so which needs to be addressed by the political the authorities the interim government which the protesters are proposing. So all that would need to sort of take place, but some sort of relief you can see if Rajapaksa step down and interim government takes over, just to stabilize the situation, because Sri Lanka cannot move not even a month, because the essential goods are not there. The ships that come to the port takes a long time to clear the goods. Now today, with the unions, all unions in the country protesting, you can imagine the gravity of it, because that there won't be any state institutions functioning today. And this will impact the vulnerable groups. This will impact many in the society. And we have reached a tipping point, Sri Lanka, in political reform, because to bring back democratic norms and values, to end corruption. And this is the tipping point that I see. And yeah, so I'll stop there. So that's my last slide.
Thank you very much, Asanga, for a comprehensive overview of the situation going on in Sri Lanka. You have pointed out that there were early warnings, and what we also observing in Islamabad, that economic downturn in Colombo did not happen overnight, and there have been warnings that Sri Lanka was approaching to bankruptcy. So why Rajapaksa regime was so reluctant to take quick decisions like going to the IMF?
First point is that ultra-nationalist posture, because they saw IMF as economic hitman. I mean, they would come, set conditionality, and because of that posture that they had, the political, because 10 months ago, I mean, there are a lot of, you can see the arguments have been published between the former governor. Former governor has been blamed for not going for IMF. But the governor has mentioned that I could have gone to IMF, but the government posture was not that. They did not give me the the authority, basic authorization to go ahead. But that's why. But I mentioned that even within the government, they must have had a lot of disagreements on that. But the overall, the ultra-nationalist inward posture kept them away.
Okay, so do you think that Rajapaksa regime misled the people of Sri Lanka about the economic perils, or the President Rajapaksa was misled by the economic advisors? So what was the case?
No, I think it's both ways, because there was advisors who advised on, for example, what I mentioned, like supporting Xinjiang and supporting, Chinese, paying 24 hours before Wang Yi came. So there were completely, I mean, the foreign policy was tilted towards China only. I call it the bandwagoning foreign policy. So there were multiple, I mean, in the foreign relations, in the economic sphere, there were advice coming in towards him, like, not to go to IMF, reject MCC, seeing it as a national security threat. When I read that entire recommendations on the US MCC, the 480, the grant, I mean, it is, any academic would look at it and would say, think like, what are they trying to, this panel is trying to, so they're making something that is not there. They're making a military corridor from the eastern side to Colombo. So all that, and then seeing it as a significant security threat. So all that, I think the ill advice that the president got from these panels as well as committees is clearly there. But now you see the governor blaming the higher authority, the political authority, saying that, look, you are the one who didn't want us to go. So there is a blame going on from within the political body as well as the bureaucracy. So, I mean, I think it both ways.
Thank you, dear participants. We are now moving to the question and answer session. So if you have any question, please type in the chat box, or you can raise your hand. Now I can see Professor Samina Yasmin from Australia wants to ask a question. So over to you, Samina Yasmin, Professor Samina Yasmin.
Hi, thank you very much. Thank you very much to the presenter. Really enjoyed listening to your ideas. I'm just wondering, you've talked about the problems on the government's end and referred to the reactions among the people, but who is really taking the leadership position in the in demonstrations against the government and coming up with demands? And is this in the academia, or are there other groups, or is it just organic growth of responses? And the second one is just a comment. I think you are drawing parallels between Pakistan and Sri Lanka. When it comes to appointments of military officials in the civilian sector, sorry, can you still hear me?
Yes, I can.
When it comes to the appointment of the military in the civilian sector, is it the military taking the initiative, or is it the president thinking that it's in his interest to bring the military? Because there are two different directions in which this process goes.
Correct.
So,
thank you so much. A very, very important questions that you raised. The second question, I mean, I've been also, who wanted when the appointments were given, was it the military or was it the president? It was the president's decision. It was not the militaries who wanted these positions and all. So that's clearly the case in Sri Lanka. So the first question you mentioned about the protesters, there is not a single person leadership. So there are multiple, like the Bar Association, for example, the Lawyers Association, the so there are multiple stakeholders in this. It's not one particular leader. So they are kind of an organic group. There's a danger also in here because when there's no leadership, I mean, like the Arab Spring, that's why I mentioned Arab Spring. So they're out there for a cause. They're not supporting, I mean, some of them are supporting the opposition leader, but some of them are not for a political cause. Some of the, I mean, some protesters are talking about new faces. They are tired of seeing the old, mainly because of corruption. I know for Pakistan also there's a serious concern on corruption, but Sri Lanka has failed immensely to punish high officers. High officers, what I mean is political officers. Not a single one has been jailed for the last 5, 6 years, but I know Pakistan has been successful in that. But people are really fed up of the corruption issue in Sri Lanka. They're tired of it. They're angry about it. Some of them, when I interviewed, basically were very angry about it. So this is the reason that I say the anarchic situation that people can get into, like 1988 situation where huge insurrection came up. The shooting in Rambukana gave an indication, an early indication about this, and I hope that we will not get into that path. But President appointing, getting the military to the the districts on the 22nd by a gazette notification. Now those are the factors that that I see that he's trying to be there and try out everything to remain in power, but then bring the military would pull us towards a different model, and so this is very I would say a dangerous situation.
Thank you very much. I have another question from my colleague Nabila Jaffer, who is a research analyst. And first, there is a comment. Thank you very much for educating presentation. And the question is, how do you view China's inadequate response to this crisis? So related to this question, I have also another question, like China is offering more loans instead of adjustment, fiscal adjustment. So what's going on? What is China's response to this crisis?
China has, I mean, they have rejected on restructuring. They don't want to, what they have mentioned is that if they restructure Sri Lanka, they have to restructure many other countries. And then I know Pakistan has borrowed about 27 billion from on the CPEC, and also Sri Lanka also is borrowed heavily. But what they have agreed is to give loans to settle their loans. Now this I can't clearly understand how it is done, because I don't know the interest rates. No one knows. I spoke to a few of the people in Colombo even, so they don't know the interest rates on those. But I think I mean, here's the situation, because the loans we have got for these projects like Mattala, for example, $209 million, they're not generating any revenue. So it's a huge problem that we have. The Hambantota also, like we were expecting thousands of ships, but we not even have 100 now. So there are many issues, like even the port city, the massive Colombo port city project, the special economic zone. Still, we don't have a single investor in there. So the biggest concern is, I think we will not be able to, because of the rising inflation and that's going on. How do we repay these debts, as well as how do we sustain them? So that's where the question is. I know because of the pandemic, as well as many other crises that's going on in the global arena, Myanmar is also facing the sort of a similar crisis. But then it will have, I mean, the countries who have borrowed significantly, who has a huge debt portfolio, would have, I mean, similar sort of impact like in Sri Lanka. So it will have, but China is That's all what China is talking about. So nothing else. And yeah.
Thank you. You have just mentioned that political stability is the key. So do you think that the resignation of Rajapaksa would help reduce tension in the country?
No,
So
definitely, Imran, because right now, what I see, there is no way out because of what I mentioned about the trust deficiency. I don't think any of the quick solutions, the reshuffling of the cabinet, he tried twice, right? I mean, the putting out the new cabinet. Then he has also admitted, now this is a very interesting factor, he admitted about the fertilizer issue that he had, which is the policy which took, and then he admitted that he was wrong. So he is a president now who's admitting that he has done something wrong in his policy decisions, but then trying to do a quick course correction. But I don't think the protesters, I mean, it's getting worse every day. It's growing, the numbers growing, it's going to different districts. The problem is when the essentials goes missing, like the food, the medicine, as well as the fuel, as well as all that. So there could be, in different outside Colombo, there could be many protests and fighting with the police. So that's dangerous.
okay. So related to this, China and India's political maneuvering, do you think both countries maneuvering with the stakeholders in Sri Lanka have resulted into this recent crisis, apart from the internal factors that are contributing to this crisis? China and India's political maneuvering in Sri Lanka. What do you say?
No, India also has contributed from the beginning of the crisis. Currency swaps to totally about 2.5 billion. So the situation is that it's going to be a humanitarian crisis. How I see it is like, if this continues without any, solution for the next couple of weeks, you are looking at a major humanitarian crisis in Sri Lanka. I think we'll need assistance from many countries, including Pakistan. Sri Lanka would reach out. We need to reach out to many countries at this, because there will be so many deaths. There won't be.
No, Asanka, sorry to cut you. I just wanted to make it clear that I'm not talking about the contribution that they have made. I'm just talking about the interference, the political at the political level. So that resulted into this.
Yeah. So the interference. If you look at it, China interference, I have clearly mentioned in my presentation. So the strategic trap on those three areas. The India, basically, India's, for example, the Maritime Rescue, MRCC, the Maritime Rescue Coordination Project, which was given, was seen by China as a serious concern, because one of the, there are going to be subunits of the MRCC, and one of them were going to be inside the Hambantota port. So there's been a sort of a competition between India and China on projects and various other stuff. But interventions, I see more interventions from the Chinese through the strategic trap and than the Indian intervention.
All right. I just want to make two more questions, then we conclude the session. Number one is the island has special, the place in India's defense and strategic security framework. And that is the sole reason New Delhi is has always discouraged and criticized China's policies towards Colombo. But India does not have the capacity to offer much in comparison to what China is offering to Sri Lanka. Considering its incapacity, India would be more willing to push Colombo towards the West, so especially the US. So is that the case? And secondly, amid this tug of war, for instance, if this is happening, how do you see the political and economic future of Sri Lanka?
Well, I think India's, I mean, of course, you mentioned about the capacity to assist. Of course, China has got much more capacity. That's a clear sign. But I think the biggest concern to Sri Lanka is about losing the democratic, values and norms in the democratic system. So what Gotabaya tried to install was, he, during the last conversation, even with President Xi, he even spoke about Chinese model, to introduce to the rural Sri Lanka. So I think the danger is that Sri Lanka should restore the democratic norms as well as this. So that's why people are saying, now they're talking about 19th Amendment. So 19th Amendment to the Constitution is what Gotabaya bought was the 20th Amendment. So you're going back to 19th means you're bringing checks and balances in those independent institutions and all that. So it's important that we do that as well as, stay within the democratic, framework and, be with the regional, architecture with security where Sri Lanka can play a huge role in maritime security. And India, of course, is the closest neighbor that Sri Lanka has. So would need to sort of also see the, you have, now there's nothing you can do because all these projects that we have started with Chinese, you can't shut it. So they're there, the Hambantota, for example, the Matala airport. So you need to find some models to develop these. So I think a regional effort has to be done. I know, Prime Minister Modi speaks on this, neighborhood first and policies. But then how do we integrate more sort of, comprehensive as well as a neighborhood with, basically on more towards on regionalism? How do we develop this area? So I think it's important. I know there's heavy geopolitics right now. Even I was just listening to the Heritage Institute where Jeff Smith was talking on the Quad. And so there is high geopolitics in the Indian Ocean. So there will be a competition, India and China, the two, rising powers. But then small countries, the littorals like Sri Lanka, how do we maneuver in this, great game of power? So, but then keeping to the values, the norms that we believe is really important. The standards, our contribution to law of the sea, and also with our regional partners. I mean, our rich, basically bilaterals with Pakistan. How do we, improve our trade? So there are multiple areas that countries should work. I think these are the prisms that I see, that how a balanced approach would be the best, even with China and India. So I'm not saying bandwagoning with China was, of course, a wrong policy. You probably heard the foreign secretary saying we have an India first foreign policy in the beginning, which shocked the entire country. And then he immediately reversed it saying, okay, then we move to China. And then talking about Xinjiang. So this is where the problem. Sri Lanka should have a clear, balanced foreign policy because there's a clear competition there. And so Sri Lanka we can't hedge. It's a dangerous game to hedge. I saw a lot of hedging going on, satisfying both. I know many countries have done that, but then when it comes to security, it's a serious issue because US would come with their agreements such as the SOFA agreement, status of force agreements. China would have their own. I mean, Solomon Island is a good case.
All right. So one last question, it's already 1:30 a.m. in the night in the United States, so it's too late. So one last question, then we conclude. How polarized is the public in Sri Lanka after this crisis, particularly over the China, India, and the United States? about the foreign relations. How polarized is
They're deeply polarized, Imran. It's like, I mean, what the ultranationalists, that whole prescription preached was that, tilted towards the whatever the local values and whatever, that polarized the country religiously, ethnically. I mean, you can imagine like archaeology director general becoming military and then talking about something else. And the Buddhists, the problem is there's a huge danger in these countries. I mean, religious, because we had a lot of concerns on the 30-year war on ethnic issues. So when you do that, I mean, of course, pandemic gives a good environment to do that. That's why I said those conditionalities give a good centripetal forces, to put all these communities together, even the Easter Sunday bombings. So all this gives an opportunity for the leader, but then it's a matter of, how you maintain, balance it with the other, communities and how you move forward. I mean, the human rights issues, we cannot just ignore the concerns. You have to address it. There are multiple reconciliation. I mean, there are multiple challenges that Sri Lanka has. So I think that's the polarization is there in the society. It happened because of the ultranationalist posture. And the Bodhubala Sena, the priest was given appointments, multiple. I mean, this is one. So I think the depolarization has to be addressed if the country is also progressing forward. And the concern here is that even the external assistance that we get, you need to be extremely careful, countries like Sri Lanka or Pakistan. I mean, there are terrorist experts who come from outside the country. There are many terrorist experts within the country. I mean, we fought the 30-year war. So the danger is that, you see, these people are going to leave now. So the polarization will remain and we would have to, deal with it.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Asanga, for a detailed discussion on the subject. And we always get benefit from your bold analysis. And that is the reason we request you time and again for your thoughts. And you have raised very important points that indeed carry lessons for Pakistan as well, even for other countries in the region struggling with the economic crisis and depending on the external factors like China, IMF, and others. So we have to be very careful. This is the key lessons that you have conveyed. And the political stability, it's important. And in Sri Lanka, Rajapaksa regime has to, I think, need to listen to the dissident voices, and the solution is always there in reforming the economic sector and bringing this political stability. So thank you once again, Asanga, for this webinar, and thank you all the participants for being with us and for your questions. Thank you, and we meet again with another subject of important. I ended this session here, and thank you very much, Asanga, and the participants. Allah Hafiz, and have a blessed Eid coming ahead. There are Eid holidays after this session, so enjoy your holidays. Allah Hafiz. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.